I think the fence alone is a good idea. But once again, I come from a family of legal immigrants. My grandparents came to Old Orchard Beach from Greece. So I think it's very important we always qualify our statements about legal immigration by embracing the fact that this country was built on legal immigration. So I don't want to sound like, let's close off the fence or close off the borders. I want to have a high fence, but I also want to have broad gates.
In your opinion, is this a matter of national security?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think you can deny that. I mean, we've had issues here most recently. I mean, this wasn't one of national security, but here in Maine, we live in a sanctuary state, which means illegals can come in from outside the country and get licenses. And licenses, as we know, unlock a whole lot of other things, services, as well as, I mean, you need your license if you're online and you want to apply for something, you want to get a credit card. It opens up a whole bevy of resources to a person. So I think we know there was a ring busted out of Montreal that was bringing Pakistanis into Vermont and circulating throughout the Northeast. Last week there was an issue where a Brazilian came and testified in front of a court in, I think, Bangor, and told him it's well known within the legal immigrant community that you can get licenses in Maine. I think it goes without say, when you've got 12 to 40 million illegals in the country, we know a very small percentage of them are Mexican illegal immigrants. Where are the rest coming from? I think it's, when you look at where they're coming from, yeah, of course. We know how many people was it? 18 hijackers and the damage they did on September 11th. It doesn't take a whole lot.
Okay. You currently have an online petition to end Maine's status as a sanctuary state. How's that process going?
Yeah, that's going great. In fact, that's a sanctuary state. When I go to most of my functions, I always say, does everybody realize we live in a sanctuary state? And I'll say about a quarter of the room raises their hand. And this also came up during the presidential debates recently, actually last fall, when Eliot Spitzer, the governor of New York, was circulating legislation to allow illegals to get licenses in New York City. And, Hillary answered the question, in my opinion, poorly. As a result, her stock fell the next day. The governor of New York's stock fell significantly the next day. But here we are in Maine. 3 years ago, the governor signed an executive order that allows illegals to come into the state and get licenses. We know that according to the records of the DMV or the BMV, there's 5,000 people living in this state that have the Social Security number 999-99999. That creates a huge problem, both for us economically and from a national security perspective. But regardless, I'm the only one running for this office. I mean, this is a hot, contentious issue this time around with a position piece on my website. Here's how I would end it. Every other candidate in this race, and this is very important for Mainers to understand, I'm the only one that has a position piece on this and is very clearly outlined to how we're going to stop it. We're going to stop it through building a fence. We're going to stop it by cranking down on sanctuary cities and sanctuary states. And we're going to also crack down on the companies that have been profiting from them. Just last week, Homeland Security Secretary Chertoff raised the fees that we'll be assessing on companies that are actually doing or practicing this. But the fact that I'm the one leading the charge. So to answer your question, yeah, I have an online petition. Little old me, the steam engine that could, has got over 1,200 signatures on that petition. This is an issue that is important to Mainers. And the fact that I am leading the charge on this is, for me, it's great. Even my Republican opponent has come out for a path to citizenship, which, to some people translates to amnesty. So I'm very clear and different on that.
Let's stay on that. First off, you believe that we would be diminishing the value of our freedom if we were to start giving our citizenship away for free. In other words, amnesty. On your website, you state, quote, "We have laws on the books.
Sure.
Let's enforce them."
Yeah.
Can you explain your opinion on amnesty?
Sure. Well, I think the way amnesty was explained last year is like, hey, there's 12 million people in the country. Let's allow them, I think it was, pay a fine, $5,000, and essentially they'll cut to the front of the line. This is, first of all, it's an outrage to the people who have come from other countries who are standing in line, going through the paperwork, doing the right thing, and to say, hey, you know what, we are going to grant or reward or incent illegal behavior and let them come in and stay here legally. So I've talked to a lot of people who have come from Ireland, from other places, even from Mexico, who say, I came the right way, to allow people to just jump in line. I think also, the language requirements, the history requirements, from a sovereignty perspective and who we are as a country and truly embracing our legacy as the United States is also troubling. So I don't support anything unless it goes to the back of the line and allows the people who are in line to become citizens first. And I think that's what most people look at it. They think, one, it's a national security issue. They think, too, it's an economic issue. Every illegal in the country over the course of their lifetime costs the average American taxpayer per person $89,000 per person. That's a huge expense. So I think there's a way to do this. I think there's a way to resolve it. And so to answer your question, yeah, I think you can do it, and I think you can. I think you do have to enforce the laws on the books. When we first started this process back in November, there were 8 states that had sanctuary policies, illegals. There's now 4. Maine is the only one on the East Coast still with that policy in place. So there is it's sort of a state-federal cooperative effort now. I mean, 12 to 20 million people, that's significant. And when you look at our border enforcement agents and our resources available to enforce those laws, we're going to need cooperation between state and federal officials to resolve this issue.
What would you do to deal with the illegal immigrants already living in this country?
Well, the illegal immigrants already living in this country, there's approximately 12 to 20 million. And we know that a lot of them are here for work. However, we know a lot of them are here for the wrong reasons. There's crime. We heard just last week about a school bus that was, I think some children were injured significantly. It was hit by an illegal alien, and that illegal alien unfortunately had a couple offenses on his or her record. So we know that it's costing not only dollars, but sometimes lives, unfortunately. I think, as I said, the only path to citizenship I support is a path to the back of the line. There are some pretty interesting proposals on how to do that. I think the first place to do it is the place of employment. Hold the employer accountable to make sure that person gets out of the country, treated in a humane way. So if they want to come back in like all the other wonderful legal immigrants we have, they should do it that way.
How will you crack down on businesses for that particular?
Well, last week, Secretary Chertoff, it's increased the fine by 25% on every single illegal alien. I mean, like you said, though, we have an enforcement issue. We don't have enough agents to successfully enforce the laws. Another law I'd like to see changed, one is right now we have a catch and release, which is when you find somebody and they can't produce documents of citizenship, we release them for a later court date. Typically what they do is go to another state. We don't see them again. So there's this kind of systemic problem within the illegal immigration enforcement, I guess, body of work, if you want to say that needs to be tweaked. I think the other problem is the anchor baby problem we've had for a long time. If a woman comes over the border, has a baby, now that child is a citizen, and how do you export or deport somebody who's got a baby? I mean, you really can't. So I think that's a function of a policy that's lived past its time. So those are a few options, but I'm encouraged by places like Oklahoma and New Mexico that are getting a lot of cooperation between state and federal officials because it's a resource issue as well.
Let's turn to the issue of health care reform.
Sure.
You openly disagree with universal health care. Instead, you support simple reforms that would improve our current health care system. Explain those simple reforms that you would support as U.S. representative to improve our current health care system.
Some good questions. This is a tougher interview. I'm proud of you. First, I will say that, and this is important for people your age as well, which is one, from an entitlement perspective, typically we think of Medicare and Medicaid, both from an income and age perspective when it comes to qualifying for health care. Medicare and Medicaid are going to be insolvent, in other words, bankrupt, by 2017. That's a huge problem because it's a huge part of the budget. So, how do we typically resolve that is raise taxes. So we know just generally right now, this is the part that baffles me. I mean, if you can't afford something, you don't typically buy it. That's the way my parents raised me. And here we are talking about creating universal health care when we're looking bankruptcy in the face. This is not even mentioning the problem with Social Security, which is going to go bankrupt shortly thereafter. And then in 2040, my children, all the taxes they'll be paying will be going just to pay the interest on the debt. That's like every time you get your credit card payment, you'll just be paying the interest on the debt. That's significant because taxes will have to go up every year, 50% every year, and every subsequent year after that. We have got a significant economic crisis on our hands. In fact, Moody's, you probably not know who Moody's is, but they determine bond ratings, is significantly thinking about devaluing our bond, our bonds, the U.S. Treasury notes, which is, when you think about most foreign investment holding those, that has cataclysmic kind of implications to it. So back to your question, the current healthcare system, ironically enough, I've come to find out, was created right after World War II. And think about, as a society and as an economy, how we've changed. I mean, after World War II, people like my father and my uncles went to work at these big factories. There were big companies. We have changed significantly. Today, 750,000 people declare eBay as their primary source of employment. We no longer work for the big company. We work for ourselves. We become independent contractors. But our healthcare system says you can only buy healthcare at the place of employment. It's crazy. I mean, I think that's a systemic problem. When you look at society, it's really become a lot more fractionalized and decentralized, and our healthcare system really remains, monopolistic in the sense that's the only place you can buy healthcare. I think, a Geico e-insurance scheme for buying insurance would drive the rates down, as well as probably create some great caveman commercials. But I think that's issue number one, is how do you get it?